Ladies and gentlemen, guys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Age of Warfare podcast. As you may well know, we have been out for 3 weeks. We were supposed to come on last week, but it happened to fall on the 4th of July weekend, so we figured we'll just take that week off because I'm sure many of you were out and about and enjoying yourself that week. But we're back today. We're back this week. And we're back with a pretty fun one. We're going to be talking about one of Aiden's favorite topics. I call it the Byzantine Empire. He calls it the Byzantine Empire. However you want to call it, that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the Byzantine Empire. Yep. Ooh, it sounds fun because it's going to be fun. And it came up when we were talking about the Dark Ages because, me and Aiden, we got this little nitpick. We hate when people call it the Dark Ages. So, because it's to say that there was no actual empires existing, but that couldn't be further from the truth. So today we're going to be talking about one of the greatest empires of the Dark Ages, the Byzantine Empire. So anyway, before we get started, Aiden, how are you, my man?
I'm good. The weather here has been roasting hot. It's probably not that hot for you guys, but it's 30 degrees at the moment in
that's totally for you guys.
Yeah, it's been like that for the last couple of weeks. We had some rain at the weekend. Well, I was in Wales, so of course it rained. That cooled it down a little bit, but it's just gone straight back up again. And it is, you take 2 steps outside and your skin turns red and you start sweating all your body water out. So, but yeah, I'm sat inside with a very large fan directed at me at the moment, so I'm doing all right. But yeah, apart from that, I've had a couple of weeks off work, so I've just been sorting out the flat. It's that giant board behind me, which is actually a giant mirror. So I turned it round so we didn't have that weird thing going on as well. But apart from that, yeah, it's been quite a fantastic couple of weeks. How about you, Angel?
For me, just busy with my new book, editing. I've been in the editing cave, and while I've not been in the editing cave, just been dealing with my father's appointments. It's been picking up his number of appointments. We got another one on Monday, so out and about. So hopefully I get some more editing done this week. This weekend, all that good stuff. But anyway,
that as well. Yeah.
I don't want to waste too much time because we got a fun one today. The Byzantine Empire, as you might call it. Byzantine, doesn't really matter. We know what it is. It's the Eastern Roman Empire. And fun fact, the Byzantine Empire, the capital used to be called Byzantium. I'm sure you remember that.
Yeah, so fun bit of history about Byzantium. It started off life when Athens and Sparta were at war in the Peloponnesian War. So you're talking like quite a lot BC here. And Athens was known for its navy, Sparta was known for its troops on land. Athens wanted to build its navy further, so it went north to log the forests around that northern coast of the Bosphorus. And it set up a logging camp that turned into a small town and then a city, and they called it Byzantium. Obviously, as time went on, the Romans appeared, the Romans took the land, and because of its importance of where it is, it then flourished and then became Byzantium, which is where we get the name from. However, when the empire was really set up is when it changes to Constantinople in respect for Constantine. Well. So it ends up changing its name depending on what it was. But yeah, its foundation was an Athenian logging encampment.
Yep. I was going to ask you where did the main Constantinople came in, and you kind of answered it for everyone. So good job. Really good job. So basically, what we have is the map of the Roman Empire, which is the Western Roman Empire, and then the so-called Eastern Roman Empire. And and my first bump into the Byzantine Empire was Age of Empires 2, where you can play as the Byzantine Empire. But but I noticed the technology tree for the Byzantines wasn't very accurate because it had the Middle Eastern architecture type, even though the Byzantines had a more of a Roman building type. But back in 1999, we had to take what we can get. Although now, if you play Age of Empires 2 in the definitive edition, the Byzantines have a more accurate architecture type. So for those who have played Age of Empires 2, you might you might know what I'm talking about there. But yeah, the technology you were able to recruit paladins, knights, and camels. And they were able to, and you might say camels. The Byzantines actually had camels. They had camel archers, and they had Romans on camels.
So one of the things about it with Age of Empires 2, at that sort of time, people associated Byzantines with, as you can see by the map, they held a lot of the Middle Eastern territories of the Roman Empire, because that was the whole point. And they were fighting against all the various Persians and then Turks later on, and everything that was over that side of the area. So, in essence, a lot of their conflicts were in that mold of there was a lot of Middle Eastern architecture around them. There was camels, because obviously if you're fighting across desert, camels are going to be one of those things. And when you're recruiting, Byzantines are famous for recruiting mercenaries as well. So they used a lot of those things as well. So at the time, people thought of them a lot for that side of things. However, there is this separate side of the Byzantines where there was a lot of Western stuff as well. And there was a bit of fusion between the both. The Hagia Sophia is the classic example of the domed roof, but it being a cathedral. And we get that style of architecture from, where you can say it's a mosque, and it looks like I think it currently is at the moment. They keep changing it in Turkey, but where it is, and you look at it and go, well, yeah, that makes sense. It's a slightly different style, but whatever. And then you say it's a church. You look at it and go, well, yeah, that makes sense. It's a cathedral, and it's got the similar architecture, which is which shows quite well this fusion between the provinces of these two different styles that come into it as well. So, as you say, heavily leaning on one side of it doesn't give the full picture, but at the same time, it gives part of the picture for them people to lead on from.
So what we have here, guys, is a picture of Justinian the Great. He was obviously, for those who know your history, he was perhaps the greatest emperor in Eastern Roman Empire history. He's the one that kind of led the Byzantine Empire to the greatest extent.
His story is very tragic as well. It's he's both the greatest of emperors, and then in his later reign, you start to see the fall of the Byzantine Empire. But yeah, I was going to ask you if you're going to put this map up as well.
Yeah,
This shows what he did, which is quite astonishing, really, when you consider it.
Yeah, let's bring it up a little bit. Yeah, we got, so the red is basically everything that belonged to the Byzantines, but then you have a little bit of a night pink here, which were, which were other territories. So he did have a few territories, but you notice that, he got ancient Carthage, which used to be the Carthaginian Empire. He brought that back. But you notice one thing, Aidan. You notice Hispania, right?
Yeah.
He only got to the southern part of Hispania, the Cordoba region and Carthagonova. It never really got north, where the Visigoths were. Never really got north.
And that was, I say right, it was the Visigoths. It was them and the Vandals as well. As much as they fought against them, it was so much of a struggle that they had to sort of settle their borders where they were. And they tried, but they couldn't. And there's a certain point when you go, we're just going to keep losing our armies if we do this. So there were certain alliances they started bringing out, which is what started these, like the Visigothic kingdom and all of these other post-Roman Western kingdoms coming in. Because they were making alliances with the Byzantines. So then they needed a king. They needed a more formal setup to have these alliances to stop these wars as well. So in essence, that's what started creating these identities and it goes quite deep into the psychology of setting up a kingdom, of your identity is often pushed and is formulated by external pressures as well.
Yeah.
So it's these kingdoms that then come about.
And because some people say that the Byzantines were able to restore the Roman Empire, as they say, which to a degree is true, but to a degree it's also not true, because the Roman Empire, don't forget, they had all of Hispania, they had all of France, gold territory, they had, at one point they had England, they definitely had a lot more. The Roman Empire was a lot bigger. So some people will say this was like the restoration of half of the glory of the Roman Empire.
Yeah, if you think back to, say, just before Julius Caesar's conquests,
right?
This is kind of like the map. It's very similar in the West, especially before Julius Caesar conquered what he did. And if you look at what they restored, the areas they restored were actually where essentially the money-making provinces were.
The Mediterranean.
Look at all the trade routes. You've got the entrance to the Mediterranean. You've got Provence, where they've partially gone into, but not fully. They've got Italy, you've got Corsica, they've got Egypt as the breadbasket, they've got North Africa for everything that gives. They've got the whole of Anatolia, which had loads of stuff in it. You've got Greece and the areas around there up to the Danube. And then you've got these Middle Eastern provinces. One of the things that was noticeable about the Romans, after you were a consul, you became a proconsul, which became you became a leader of a province. And what used to happen was there was a lot of politics and fighting, that people wanted to be leaders of the richer provinces because you got part of the taxes, you would be able to enrich yourself. It was kind of like a reward. And the provinces they wanted were essentially, this is the map of the provinces that they wanted. People didn't want to be the proconsul of Britannia or Northern Gaul or along the Rhine frontier, because that's a lot of fighting and a lot less taxation. You're fighting for the glory of Rome. But at that point, when you're proconsul, that's not what you're after. You're after
and you bring up a very good point there. Because in Rome Total War, the easiest way to make money in Rome Total War is to take over all the sea trade routes. Take over the sea trading cities like Carthage, Tantalum, Rome, Artinium, Pativium, Mediterranean. All the Athens. You get the idea. All the sea. Once you got control of the seas, that's when the money really starts to pour in, because you got control of all the sea.
And it's what you can also see from the map is the only bit of the Mediterranean coast they don't have is actually the area of Provence is quite interesting at this time period, because they separated in the formation of the kingdoms. They became trading hubs as well. It's known as Provence because it was the province, is what the Romans called it, because it was these trading hubs. And so if you go later on to the Renaissance, 1,000 years later, all of those cities that pop up that have all of these trade routes across the Mediterranean and are city-states that are so important, like Venice and places like that, they either the Byzantines controlled them or had strong relationships with them. They didn't need to conquer them because they could trade with them. So they didn't use their armies because they could use that trade aspect. As you're saying, the sea routes in the Mediterranean are where it's at.
I was thinking, there's so many PC games on the Western Roman Empire and the actual Roman Empire. I don't see too many PC games on the Byzantine at the highest. At the peak of the empire. I mean, you can play as the Byzantines in medieval 2 Total War, but that's already getting closer to their decline.
So, I haven't really. What are the things?
That'd be a really good idea for a Total War game if you compare the Byzantine Empire during the peak.
And the things that I did is with my love of the Byzantines. Do you remember Rome Total War Barbarian Invasion, the expansion?
Yeah.
I played Rome Total War very little because I have got Barbarian, the Barbarian one at the same time. So I played Rome Total War to get a handle on the rules, played it a little bit. And then I used the Barbarian expansion. You actually, this is the sort of time period that it goes into, that you're fighting from there, and you could fight as the Byzantines, and you could really push that. So it was an expansion of the main game that you had. Also, if you played Crusader Kings, and you had the expansion, they push the time period back, and you can play as the Byzantines. It's incredibly difficult. Like within your first reign, the character you play. So the way that game plays is you play it as the family. So when your character who you are dies, then someone inherits. You've got to make sure you set up inheritances. And I played as the Byzantines. What was quite interesting when I played it, I became Emperor of Hungary as well. So I got the Hungarian Empire. I was pushed back from the east so much that I lost all of my claims in Anatolia. And the family that I was playing ended up owning sort of, if you look on the Danube frontier of this, through that and into Russia. So I became, so that rise of the Novgorod princes, I became part of that family, which is kind of historically accurate, realistically. But yeah, you've got to search for these expansions though to actually play it. There's no real games that are very specific on it. One of the ones is actually Rome Total War, not Rome Total War, Medieval Total War. You could play as the Byzantines. You could just play the battles against people. At the time, I was studying the Notitia Dignitatum, which is the Byzantine military handbook. And I played against a friend who was like, people don't defeat me doing this. I'm really good at this. And I was like, cool, we'll play as that. And I just followed the Notitia Dignitatum, and I completely destroyed his army to few losses. Enveloped him, pinned him with my infantry, and he's like, what's that coming out of the woods? It was all my light cavalry. Went round behind him, completely destroyed him. And then my heavy cavalry came out, and he's like, what do I do? I was like, die, really? And he just smashed through and took the rest of him out. I was like, yeah, if you play the rules properly, you can do that. And that's one of the things I loved about that game. It's obviously the first one, but if you actually use their historical setups of how you play the armies, you stood a better chance of winning if you used the tactics and the troop setups that they used, which is quite a good thing about the game. It's why it was so popular as well. So, yeah. Hey, dear Sophia. Right, cool. Yep. Yeah, I was waxing lyrical about how good I was at that game.
Yeah, Bobby. Yeah, before the Turks took over.
So this is what I was saying about the architecture, that if someone turned around and went, oh, this is just a giant mosque, you'd look at it and go, well, yeah, obviously it's got minarets, it's got a domed roof. The domed roof was partly from the Middle Eastern architecture and partly from, what's the place in Rome with the domed roof? It's got a hole in the middle for the sun to come in. It's still around as well. Quite a famous place. So you had this architecture in Rome itself as well that came over. But this is part of the aspects of it changing hands as well. But at the same time, if you look at this, and can you grab a photo of Temple Church in London?
Temple Church in London.
It's just behind the offices of Seahor & Co on Fleet Street. It's an amazing place, absolutely amazing place. But it's hard. It's where it's so surrounded by buildings. It's difficult. Right. So if you look at this, this is. Well, you can't really see the dome on this, but you see what you can see though is the circular nature of the architecture. You saw this a lot with just going later, obviously, into the Crusades, but the Templars brought back this circular architecture they would use more often rather than the more rectangular architecture. There we are. That's a great picture. So you've got this on the right. You can see that just looks like a standard church. But on the left, you can see this circular influence from the Middle East that they brought through. And came through from that. And part of that was their dealings with Byzantium and obviously working with the Byzantines. to retake the lands, and his influence came back. And there's several churches in England. You can notice Templar churches by this very distinctive style of architecture as well. This church is also this is in Dan Brown's novel and then the subsequent film as well. It's very famous as a Templar church, obviously, and it is in the it's literally just behind the private banks of Fleet Street as well. But yeah, this shows how the influence is mixed throughout it. So if you look back at the Hagia Sophia, you can see that it looks slightly more Middle Eastern because of the closeness to the Middle East as well. But this progression through the architectural styles where they brought this style that's very
it's funny. Yeah, it's funny because the Byzantine Empire never really gravitated towards the Gothic style architecture that came in Western Europe or everyone else.
Yeah, it's it's like the Hippodrome as well. That's very distinctly Roman architecture, and that was such a centerpiece of Constantinople. Like the amount of revolutions that started in that place because the sports fans decided to kill each other. I mean, apparently that's how revolutions start in Byzantium. The blues and the greens at each other's throats constantly, quite literally. There we are. It's a great picture. Now that just looks like an extended Colosseum. It just looks like someone's put Colosseum into AI and made it longer.
Yeah, I mean, if it was still in Constantinople. Now, hold on. Actually, I got a more realistic picture for you here. You know, more like a drawing, but you get the idea.
Yeah, but you can see what I mean, though, that it looks like someone's put the Colosseum into AI and extended it. But no, that's actually a realistic picture of what it looked like. And you can tell from this, this etching that you've got, that is literally what it looked like. It was extended because it was a chariot racing arena. If anyone's watched the really old film Ben-Hur, Ben-Hur's amazing. It's about chariot racing. I think Jesus appears in it at one point. One of the really old epics. It is one of those films that actually brings this type of thing into cinema, and that was that must have been the 60s at least. It was it's really old film. It's like Spartacus. It was in that era as well. So you have this architecture that is very distinctly Roman, and you have this architecture that is what you can even see in the foreground, the domed roof and the circular architecture, this architecture that is influenced by the Middle East as well. And it's the thing about the Byzantines, they've mixed both sides, which also explains why their emperor was like their emperor was as well. And that's one of the important things about Justinian, the power that he had. As we've spoken about Rome so many times, and how these consuls would have power, but once they tried to gather too much power, someone would kill them. The same thing happened with the emperors as well, that they would off them. But the Byzantines, they would kind of kill their emperors and do horrible things, and we can get into that at some point. But they were more seen as what we would see as emperors and kings, like in a fantasy novel, or even when you get into the proper medieval period, this idea of a divine right. You are there through the will of the gods, or God, as it were, in this sense as well. We have Dungeon Dan.
Dungeon Dan, yes. And it's good to see you as well, Mr. Dungeon Dan Ubel. Yes. Also, I wanted to show you anything with a bushbike today. Let's see.
That just looks so Egyptian, which is a Roman thing as well.
This is in Istanbul. Yep. This is what it is today. And it's crazy that it looks Egyptian, but that is a Roman thing as well, believe it or not. Don't forget, Rome had control of what they call Egyptus, they called it.
Yeah. And the whole idea of this stele thing, like you can see in the picture, came from there. They just nicked it and went, that looks really cool, let's start using that. So you end up with, and this goes back then to this mix of architectural styles that they're starting to bring in from all over the places. So it's really, you see, this is a progression from the Roman Empire into a later Roman Empire. It shows how much of Rome there was, but Rome changes as well. What the glyphs say, I'm pretty sure they are actually hieroglyphs as well. Looking at it, and unfortunately, I can't read hieroglyphs anymore. Used to be years ago I could, but I can't these days.
Yeah, I'm not good with hieroglyphics, so can't necessarily tell you that. I'm not necessarily that good with hieroglyphics.
They probably say something like Roman Empire's the best. We're better than all
Yeah,
of you.
some propaganda.
Yeah, it will be that. It always is.
But Hayden, I was gonna bring this up. I was looking at a question on Reddit asking what would be your favorite historical time period. What would be the one historical time period you might to live in? And I said I would love to live in during the peak of the Byzantine Empire. That would be my. I think it would be even better than the peak of the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire. I would love to see what the Byzantine Empire looked like at its peak, how society looked inside.
Yes, yeah, very much so. And the thing that I was talking about when we were talking about the printing press is their love of handbooks as well. One of the things I absolutely love is the amount of gardening handbooks they had. The Byzantines at the upper echelons were really into their gardens as well. That goes back to that link again to the Persians, the Persian fountains and Persian courtyards that are very impressive. I quite frankly want one. But they had all these handbooks. So it's why we get a lot of this information. It's because we know how they did things. It's often we look at it and we have to work out how they did something, but we can work out why they might do something relatively easily because they might tell us, but we don't know how. Byzantines, however, wrote us handbooks. They told us how they did a thing, which is amazing. Theodosian walls, the best walls ever. There were how many sets of walls? Was it 5 in the end? Or was it 3 major and 2 minor? I never remember, but it was a very impressive number of them.
And for those who don't know, these are the walls. These are the walls of Constantinople, which was important during a very important siege in 717 and 718 against the Muslim Arabs that tried to besiege them, which was actually ironically, Aiden. 717 is in the heart of what we call the Dark Ages. So
exactly, yeah. Which is the whole point of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So the Theodosian was essentially the Byzantines were incredibly paranoid about getting attacked through the Balkan region. I did my undergraduate dissertation on the region, and it's thought the sort of during the 6th century, especially, pretty much there were no civilians. You were either in the military, or you worked for the military, or you were a reservist as well. I delved into this, and it's a little bit more complicated than it was my conclusion. However, the land was quite bare, and the problem was that they kept having invasions. So the invasions that were part of the fall of the Western Empire, they kept happening of these people coming across. We had some quite famous instances of people coming across, and then people. This would make an absolutely fantastic series. Right? Have you watched Vikings Valhalla yet? If you haven't, watch it, because Vikings Valhalla is they become members of the Varangian Guard. So you actually see what the Byzantines do and how they treat people, and it's actually quite accurate. There's a certain duplicity in their dealings, which often leads to their downfall. There's pure paranoia that runs through the whole thing. And it's all to do with these invasions of, if we trust these people, they're going to attack us. But then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because they then treat those people badly because they then lie, and then those people defend themselves and attack, and then they can't hold them. To that end, the side of Constantinople that was facing towards where those invasions might come, the walls were ever extended. You just get more and more and more walls and extended out. If you look at a map of Constantinople, there's a wall that encompasses the city, and then people build outside it, and then they build another wall, and then people build outside it, and then they build another wall. And those walls were incredibly thick, incredibly well defended. And it's not until the advent of some pretty good cannons that they're eventually destroyed. As you say, incredibly important in the 700s. It takes the best part of 700 years for someone to finally get through them in a significant manner. Well, a little bit more than that, because duplicity, Byzantine Empire was run by rogue crusaders for 100 years or so. That was Fourth Crusade that went horribly wrong. And that was the Venetians as well that were involved in that. That's a separate episode.
Yeah, that's a separate episode, right?
It's these walls that kept it. And when you look at the very last part of the Byzantine Empire, all you can see is this city and its walls, and then the areas around that it can protect by leaving those walls. But the size of the city, they're having to rely on sea trade. All you need is one slight betrayal on the sea trade as well, and the city starts to fall. And it's one of the things that shows how long the Byzantines were fighting against this. They were fighting against this fall of the Western Empire their entire time they were there. The entire point of having the Eastern Roman Empire was to defend against people from the East, until you have the Battle of Manzikert, which then leads to the Crusades, where the Byzantines get absolutely destroyed. You don't have this panic setting in, this downfall of the empire in the East and those rich lands, which then leads to problems in the West as well, calling in the mercenaries of the Normans, which then leads obviously to Crusades and various other problems. But the way that this works is, until that very last moment, no one can break into the city. It's like, even with the intrigue, even with everything else, you have that moment of the Crusaders getting in, but that realistically is more of a regime change than anything else. And then that takes out the last of the regime, and then it takes a guy turning up with some of the biggest cannons that have been seen on the planet at that point.
Yep.
It was Mehmet II, if I remember rightly. Could be the first.
I wanted to show you. Here's a good map. This is the Byzantine Empire in the year 814, and you can see the difference already. You know, and you can see that Africa is they no longer have control of Africa, and I mean the empire is still pretty big, but not like what it was 300 years ago.
Yeah, and if you look at this and then think of how Turkey is now, there's actually take away what Corsica, Sardinia, Crete, the Greek lands, and then the bits that are now part of sort of Hungary, Macedonia area, and then obviously up to Sevastopol, which is we won't talk about. That's basically just Turkey, realistically.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But it's crazy that that we were talking one episode ago about how this guy came up with the theory that all these years never existed, but yet you have documented history that it did.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about it right now.
So to go back to Justinian for the moment and to see what happened in this period. So that full extent that Justinian did, the problem he had is this court intrigue. And there's if you read the 12 Emperors by Michael Psellus, it's what was it, 12? Or is it 14? Because I can't remember which way around it is. But there's an ancient Roman equivalent of it, and then you have the Eastern Roman by Michael Psellus. And it's this court intrigue, all this court intrigue that happens behind the scenes, and you get the secret histories of Procopius as well. Those sides of things start coming in, and you can see where this distrust and this paranoia that I've been talking about comes in. the general that led the armies that took all of those areas, Justinian was lied to, and he tried to have him killed, and it led to this collapse within that. And then at the same time, this is where the Black Death appears in Europe, which is why the actual plague is E pestis, which E is why pestis. Why, if you're looking at Latin, is J. It's Justinian. Its name is Justinian's plague. It's known as. It came through Egypt, as far as they know, and it completely destroyed their manpower. It was, I rarely use the word decimation, but it was decimation at first. They just lost so many, and then it went further than that, and they were absolutely destroyed by this loss of manpower at a time of civil strife, at a time when they just won all of this back.
But but the biggest catalyst to the sort of decline, one of the biggest catalysts was the Sassanid Empire. Persia. The Sassanid dynasty of Persia. It was a non-devastating war that drained. It drained their resources. When you get into a war, it just drains their resources, and it made the Byzantines open for attack when it came to the other Capanites of Egypt and Syria. They took advantage of the Byzantines' war against the Sassanid Empire, which, by the way, you have to fight in Rome total war barbarian invasion. You fight the Sassanid Empire.
This is the thing that people often forget, is this is the Islamic expansion. The Byzantines were trying to hold. They were the people fighting it. So when we looked at that earlier map, all of those territories that were on the edge of where the Islamic expansion was, they were all Byzantine territories. It was the Byzantines that had to use their full force to stop that, while at the same time trying to protect their borders into Europe. Hence these walls that I was talking about, of why they were worried about getting attacked from the other side, which ironically was the whole reason splitting into West Rome and East Rome, to defend against an attack in the west and in the east. You then have the Justinian plague hit. You then have this fallout between Justinian and his great general, who embarrasses me, I forget his name right now. But then you end up also with the Christian forces fighting the Muslims back at Battle of Crécy, where they forced them back into Spain, which then solidifies this border between France and Spain at the Pyrenees. And from that, you also have the Normans. And once you get into the Normans as well, they then have, from this then goes into Viking inheritance law. So Viking inheritance law, everyone would inherit a bit of something. The problem is they then had to switch that, and then you end up with these sons who were trained for war and had no land to go out and do something. So then they start going out and trying to settle their own territories. You then, at that time period, you have this happening in Italy with, I can't remember who was in charge of Italy at the same time. You have the Byzantines, the Normans, and this other group in Italy all fighting against each other, trying to settle this territory, with Corsica, Sardinia, all of those territories being taken and retaken. And this is what then leads into this setup before the Crusades of, we need to push back. And the Byzantines finally going, we can't do it anymore. We need these warriors who are fighting against us to fight with us. That's what that leads to. And then the eventual collapse of the Byzantine Empire. So it's so integral to the history of Western Europe as well. While it didn't control Western Europe, its integration with Western Europe was really quite deep as well. The technology, the money, the mercenaries who go there, fight, and then take the money back. The Varangian Guard. So you've got your links up to Scandinavian territories as well. So you've got this link throughout Europe that if you don't have that, you don't have this big empire at that time. You don't have, which then goes back to what we were saying last episode. If you take that time period out, Europe doesn't form like it has formed because you don't have this influence on Europe from this later Roman Empire that is still around.
Yep. By the way, Dungeon Dan asks, is this the time frame of the pseudo-historical conspiracy known as the Phantom Time High Hop. Ironically, Dungeon, you might want to go back to the previous episode, look up, go back to the, what you would call it, the Book of Silent Podcast group is in there. You can check out our last episode we did a few weeks ago. We were talking about that. And that's what gave birth to this particular episode. So, yes, this is that same time period, correct?
Yeah, 300 years, and this is all happening in those 300 years. That's what this is. This is all of those things that happen that form what we now know through that. You think of where the borders are. You can even look at this map and go, well, I can identify countries and borders within countries from this map.
So yeah, you might want to explore that Dungeon. We did an episode about that 3 weeks ago. Yeah, so yeah, you missed the episode. But don't worry, just go back to the Book of Silent Podcast group and it should be up there. Go check it now, Ashley. I'll send you the link. So while Ian is talking, I'll go look for the episode and I'll send you the link to it so you can go check it out. I'll tag you in it too.
One of the interesting things when you look at this map is you notice all those little tiny green spots along the coasts of Italy and then down through what is now Albania. Basically, it's the entirety of Albania by the looks of it. And then up all around that coastal area, all around that sea. And near Rome as well. And this is where we were talking about how these trader kingdoms came to be, these like Venice being the prime example of this, came about because they were part of these trading hubs and their eventual independence. They were still built on this model and this link that they had of this Mediterranean trading empire. They were able to control these certain areas through that. If you play the expansion on Crusader Kings, you can actually play as these as well, which is quite interesting. And then you have to try and take Constantinople, which is fun.
No worries, Dungeon. I tagged you on the podcast, so you can go check it out after this, and you can go check that out. Don't worries. It happens, man. It happens. It happens to the best of us. Sometimes we get so hooked on what we need that we forget things.
I do it with podcasts all the time. I'll be listening to a podcast. I listen to another one. I'm like, I missed something and realize I missed an episode.
Yeah, right.
It's like, whoopsie.
Whoopsie.
Yeah. But yeah, so this greatest extent that we have, essentially, as Europe's forming, it's shielding Europe from the invasions that are coming from the east, which is the whole point of the Eastern Roman Empire, why it existed in the first place as well. So to go back to this map, you've got the Islamic invasion takes out obviously Egypt, all of these lands in Africa, up into Cordoba. You've then got the entire Middle Eastern coast. You then got Cyprus, which is still, things happen now. So you've got this where this pressure is, but if you see all of these points of contact, that's stopping that coming into Europe as well. So Europe can develop itself while it doesn't have that. While the technology, though, is still transferred through, because the Byzantines are still keeping up with this technology. They still have contact. While they're at war with Persia nominally, all of these places, they're shifting alliances. It's not permanent war. It's not like something like World War II where you're at war with them, no contact. It's more like sort of the 1800s wars, or even going back to the 16 and 1700s, where your alliance might shift like 5 or 6 years later, that you're now in an alliance with these other people and you're sharing things with them as well. So you get this boost of technology that comes through as well. One of the other interesting things about this is, because of that, it's the Middle East is drawn through into Europe as well, because to be able to get through that, they then have to take Constantinople, which means they're then in Europe proper. depends on how you view how Turkey's in Europe. Most people view it as the Bosphorus. Once you're on the other side where Constantinople is, that's part of Turkey. Turkey, therefore, in Europe. Some people push it further to include Anatolia. That's up to them how they wish to divide it. But you then have the influences that go all the way through, which is perfect timing for you to put this up. So, do you want to explain this one?
What I was going to get into is the idea that obviously, Christianity started in the Roman Empire, started Christianity in the 300s, and then the Byzantine expanded it, but then they converted it into what we call today Eastern Orthodox, the Eastern Orthodox Church. So eventually, the Eastern Orthodox Church, the way it works is that the patriarch was in the Constantinople, and then the different Orthodox nations like medieval Russia, Armenia, Georgia.
They protected the northern borders of Byzantium.
So they had to pay to stay. They had to pay the Byzantine Empire. So they were within the umbrella of the Byzantine Church. But Armenia will often have their patriarch independent of the Byzantine, the Church of Constantinople. So that's what started the Eastern Orthodox Church, which I have to say I'm not that familiar with the Orthodox religion, but that's the kind of history of it.
So we can get a little bit into that. So the Council of Nicaea, which we know about, it was where there was so much strife amongst the church. The bishops of North Africa, what we now know as the Middle East, the bishops from the West, and the bishops around the centre, they all had lots of competing ideas about the nature of the Trinity, whether it was 3 in 1, 3 separate, and how the Trinity was made. So the Council of Nicaea was an idea of getting everyone together to create a central thing. An orthodoxy, some group of people who are together is an orthodox nature. It is the standard line of everyone together, which is where we use the word orthodox and why it became the Orthodox Church. Now, Catholic as well has its same root in that, but is then from different root language. So we then have Catholic means together. So you have the Nicene Creed, which is still said in churches today, and it is an important part of the service of how the church is Catholic and Apostolic. So what that is saying is Catholic, not with a big C of Catholicism, but Catholic as in the meaning of the word together, is the church together. And that came out of the Council of Nicaea. Now, the problem is, even after this, there was still this split. You had the church in Rome, and then you had the church in Constantinople. The Orthodox nature came about in the Church of Constantinople, whereas in the West, it came about in Rome, which is where we get the Catholic and the Orthodox, which means basically the same thing, yet these differences. This then leads to St. Cyril, who then ends up going from Greece to convert Russia. And because they don't have a written language, he creates a written language, which is named after him, Cyrillic. That's where the Cyrillic language comes from. And the Russian Cyrillic language, because he based it off of Greek, which is why it is so similar to Greek in the alphabet that they use. So you get this massive connection up into Russia, and that's why you get this Orthodox Church that goes that route. The Orthodox Church, like the Catholic Church, also has schisms. These happen. You have the iconoclasm. So one of the big things of the Orthodox Church is icons. So this picture, especially, well, this one isn't specifically an icon. You have icons that you have. And this then goes back into this prescriptive nature of what is and isn't allowed, of how you're not allowed under the 10 Commandments to worship idols. Some people saw the icons as idols, as idolatry. Therefore, that is not allowed to be able to do that. Whereas when you, and that's a very big view in the West, where icons are still there. You get them, Catholic Church, Stations of the Cross, for example. You get triptychs in many high church, Church of England churches. So it's still there, but it was seen as a certain amount of idolatry as well. This caused massive schisms within the Orthodox Church, which then led to problems within the Byzantine Empire as a whole, because they were very, very religious. And as I said before, the emperor became, obviously, emperors of Rome were seen as gods. When you switch to Christianity, they're seen as representative of God, which is there where we get the ruling by divine right, which then is the same thing as when you go into the 1600s in England, or Civil War is based on the same principle of the divine right of the ruler and God's appointed as well. So you end up with this a lot of religious strife, civil strife, military strife, and then general population being sort of disease, while the rich people at the top basically go about doing what they want, which sounds very familiar. But yeah, so this Nika, which reminds me of the Nika revolt. Nicaea is Nika relates to Nicaea. Inri, King of the Jews, was the tag put on to the cross when Jesus was crucified. The IC is that is that Alpha and Omega, but in different notation. But one of the big things about the Orthodox cross is the signage. The angled one at the bottom and the one at the top is where Imri was written, and they show on the Orthodox cross that sign that says Imri as well, which is that's the language that he spoke. I can't remember it off the top of my head right now, but it was the language of the region at the time as well. Then became Romanized, became into Latin as well, which is where that root comes from as well. So you get this. So there's this big problem with it as well.
But the funny thing about the Orthodox Church, it never really made its way to the Western world. It kind of remained in Eastern Europe, which is still what it is in today's world. Never really cross over into the Western world, the Orthodox Church.
And their weddings are like 10 times as long as ours as well, and involve crowns and things. Which
I heard.
Kind of cool, but as well, one of my good friends, his brother married a Russian woman at one point, and they had an Orthodox wedding, obviously, and he was the one that had to hold the crown. And he said, yes, it was torturous, the way that you had to hold that crown above the head for so long. It was almost like a coronation ceremony.
Yeah, it's crazy. It kind of leads me to another question. I wonder if Catholics and Orthodox Christians kind of get along with each other, or is still some, or is still beef between them. I always wondered that.
So here's where it gets into why the Crusades actually happened. So one of the big things about the Crusades is people say, I agree with you, they're quite long enough as it is. With the Byzantines losing the Battle of Manzikert, they lose the lands of the Middle East, and they lose the Holy City. This is obviously very important. They were the protectors of the Holy City for a very, very long time. And they'd lost it to the Muslims. While the Jerusalem is also a holy city for Muslims, the Byzantines want it back. You've got the base reasons of, well, it's our territory. You've then got the religious reasons of, well, that's our big place for our religion, which both sides can argue forever because they're both right. So they realise after the plague, they don't have the troops to be able to retake it. The Battle of Manzikert destroys the last strongest force in the Eastern Roman Empire in the area. They then call upon the Catholic Church. They send a letter to the Pope. So there's the idea of primacy. And the idea of primacy is which church, Catholic or the Orthodox Church, is the primary church in Christianity.
Uh-huh.
This debate then goes on, conflict, blah, blah, blah. It
Yep.
just goes on for years. The only way they can see a resolution is the Orthodox, let's just call him the Orthodox Pope. Let's not get into that. People will understand if I say that. But he ends up sending a letter to the Catholic Pope and going, look, we will acknowledge your primacy if you rally the forces of Western Christendom to come and fight for us to retake this Holy Land so that we can then defend it again. This thing gets lost in the mix because that Pope then dies. The next Pope then picks up this letter and he's realizing this is in the 100 Years' War. France and England are basically massacring each other constantly because they've got all of these sons of nobles. This goes back to the Norman inheritance law, to get back to Viking inheritance law. They've got all of these unlanded warriors that are doing that.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, as soon as that bit of war comes to an end, you've got a bunch of soldiers who don't know what to do. So they're going to go to the rich places, where the rich places, they're the monasteries, they're the churches, they're these places where the church has a lot of money. Now, the Pope wants to protect this. So what he does is he thinks, well, how can I get around this? And then they think back to this letter. And they think, you can kill two birds with one stone here. We can get primacy if we help them out. So to end the conflict in the West and pull those troops away, they can send them on crusade to help the Byzantines. Obviously, the Crusaders turn around and go, well, you don't have an army, we do. So
we do, right.
Which then leads to conflict, which is why that argument over which has primacy is never ever settled, because the Western Church never held up their end of the bargain because of what the Crusaders did. And the Orthodox Church turned around and called them out on it. I went, no, we didn't say that. Didn't promise that to you. And you didn't even do what you said. So go away. And so there is a certain amount of differences, but a lot of it is theological. These days is theological differences. As I said, obviously the Council of Nicaea, the way that the Godhead is envisioned of it's tripartite, or it is one in three forms, which obviously we can all work out which ones those are. So you end up with these slight doctrinal differences as well. It's a bit like the doctrinal differences between Catholics and Protestants. That's about that, but there's not really much conflict these days about that type of thing. It's more, there's kind of a mutual respect going on because same God, you kind of got the right idea, we're just going to pass over this and we're just going to debate like philosophers about the rest of it. So you do get this mutual respect between the two as well. And it's in Jerusalem, the Temple Mount. You do have Orthodox and Catholic priests to represent Christianity, who will then, the key to the building is passed between them. And I think the Jewish high priest and various state have come together to agree.
Interesting question. In your opinion, is the reason for all the fighting for that desert Buddhist state solely for ownership of the religious value? Kind of so. I mean, don't forget it. Jerusalem is kind of a religious site. It's kind of a very important religious site for Christianity. Places like Jerusalem and Bethlehem and all those places. Even Antioch has some religious value. Antioch. So yeah, to a degree.
So the other reasons are, if you look at it non-religiously, think about where it is. It's slap bang in the middle of that coast. It's in touch with the closest ports. So you have a central hub, which you can connect
close to the Mediterranean.
To trade routes. It's close to the Mediterranean. You've got ports nearby. If you want to get from the Mediterranean, you want to start trading with the Middle East and even far afield as China. Remember the Silk Road. This is where the Silk Road goes to, is this area. So you want to tap into that from a trade reason. If you want to go from Europe into Africa over the land route, you've got to go via Jerusalem. If you want to come out of Saudi Arabia and go north, you've got to go via Jerusalem. If you want to come from the east and go west, you've got to hit Jerusalem at some point. Otherwise, even if you bypass it, you've got a block in the middle between you. But religion is one of the biggest points there. It is the major site for Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. And as we know, especially today, the conflicts between the three religions are, conflicts, actual conflicts at the moment. So you can see where those religious issues come into it. But a lot of this is about holding that land. And that also allows you to control that coast, and you're near the Fertile Crescent as well. That land has been fought over since the first ever battle with the Egyptians. That it's always been fought over because it's fertile land around that area. So there is an economic reason that's in there, but the religious reason is the one that people generally fight over now because of our current technology. It's not as important. We can go somewhere else.
Well, before we end the episode, there's actually one fun fact I wanted to point out, and that's the population of the Byzantine Empire throughout the years. In 457, the population was around 16 million. At its peak, 20 million. At 565 AD, it was 20 million, which was the peak. But then during the Muslim conflict in 775, it dropped to 7 million. But then it had a bit of a renaissance around 1025 AD. It had a bit of a renaissance. It actually shot back up to 12 million as the Byzantine they were able to recover around the early 1000s. But then in 1320, it just plummeted to 2 million people until its complete downfall by the Ottomans.
So when you think about it, what's happening in 1025, there's a population boom as well because food is not scarce as well. You've had this. You've got Europe by that point is fairly well established. Within the next 100 years, you have the Crusades going on, but then that means the trade routes through Byzantium are huge because you're doing that. You've got the Templars setting themselves up. So the monetary routes are huge, and as we know, money creates money. It moving around creates wealth. Wealth isn't money. Wealth is the movement of money, and you end up with this population boom as people are healthier, things go around as well. It's not until later on that obviously when you lose territory, obviously you lose people. But also on top of that, you then have to think of the impact of the plagues that hit at these various points where you're moving into this medieval world. Just before the Black Death, England especially was starting to have a problem with the amount of food that it had. So the population was so high that trying to feed the entire population was an actual genuine struggle. The Black Death hits, we lose anywhere between 25 and 50% of our population. Then afterwards, you then get this boom afterwards of this great explosion of population and trade and wealth. And the Black Death, as I've always said, was the best thing for the rights of the poorest folk because they were able to dictate. They were the people that made the food. If you wanted people working on your land, there weren't that many of them. There were less people than there were jobs, which put the hands in the power of those people. So when you look at that population decline in the 1300s, the Byzantines, that's right in the middle of the Black Death. They're losing people to the Black Death. They're losing lands because they're at war. There's all of the stuff happening with the Crusades as well, where they're losing people to battle. They're losing lands to battle. They're just getting squeezed left, right, and centre. As people are dying, people don't want to move around, which means the wealth's not moving around, the money's not moving around, so people have less money, less food's moving around, food's contaminated because you've got the Black Death. So you end up with this, it's like the end of the Western Roman Empire, where it wasn't the barbarian invasions, because they happened all the time. It wasn't disease, well, that happened all the time. It wasn't famines, they happened. It wasn't the civil strife, it wasn't the collapse of the Senate into infighting. Those things had happened multiple times. It was the fact that all of those factors happened at the same time that really destroys them. As you said, they go back down to 2 million. They absolutely get destroyed because they get hit from the west, they get hit from the east, and then they get hit by social factors, medical factors, food factors, and climate factors. Everything hits them all at once, which leads them to be this nub of what is left of this once very
Right.
powerful empire. The knowledge is still there. It's just the people aren't, and that is the big problem.
Well, folks, wow, we are already above the hour, which means we
Yeah.
are at the end. However, I think we are going to do a part 2 of this next show because
yeah, definitely.
we still got the other side of the history of the Byzantine Empire, the 1000s and its downfall. So come join us in 2 weeks, guys. We will have part 2 of the Byzantine Empire because it's such a long history. You know, we only cover the beginnings and problems of the Byzantine Empire. Don't you, Dan? Thank you very much as always, my friend. Thank you for catching us when you did.
Yeah,
So
thanks for watching.
Yep. So 2 weeks from now, we'll be talking more about the Byzantine Empire. So come join us then. Until then, this has been, I am Tony Actionist Maximus. That is the Gate Aiden Cordier, and we will see you in a couple of weeks. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, guys, and take care.
Take care, guys. All right.